Awesome. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening and this morning, if you are in Australia or New Zealand. And we just want to really, again, I see tons of familiar faces, which I love, and some new faces. And I just really we wanted to let you know more about what Sweet Sobriety is about. Maybe you've been checking us out, but you haven't really joined us yet. And so I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Clarissa. I'm one of the co-founders. I am an addiction and mental health professional. I'm a registered social worker, and I also have my own personal story of eating disorder and food addiction recovery. And I will introduce my co-founder, Molly, in a minute. But for those of you who don't know, Sweet Sobriety is our online community. And it really was our best hopes to provide, an accessible, affordable way for individuals to access support from professionals in ultra processed food addiction, sugar addiction, whatever you want to call it. We hope to show you that, your self-determination is going to be a key role in you recovering, and that you can be radically in control of your food life. And we're just going to be here to support, encourage, and love you all the way. We offer 5 groups a week for group coaching. If you can't make those coaching calls, they will be recorded and you will have access to them. We also offer our foundational modules, and those are all based on the food addiction audit, treatment audit that we did with Jen Unwin and the team from Sweden. And so you can purchase those and we'll give you support around those in the coaching calls. We offer one-to-one coaching services, and we also offer many workshops. We're going to continue to offer these workshops to build up a library of resources for you to access. Today, Bethany's going to tell you about the next workshop we're offering, and our co-founder, Molly Painshaw, just finished emotional eating, and I'm going to pass it over to her to have her introduce herself.
Thanks, Clarissa. So hello, like Clarissa said, lots of familiar faces here, but for anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Molly Painshaw. I'm a dual licensed mental health and addiction counselor in Montana, which is in the US. And Clarissa, told you already, like it was when we started working together, well, we started out seeing clients individually and really consulting with one another. And we got together and had a vision that we could provide more services to more people at a cost that was not prohibitive for a lot of people to be able to find services, because this is an unregulated field. It's not in the DSM, it's not in the ICD, like insurance doesn't cover this kind of thing. And so a lot of people are left seeking coaches who, charge what they charge, and that's what they charge. But we come from the clinical field where we've worked with folks with, who come from all kinds of socioeconomic statuses, who have backgrounds with mental health and substance use concerns. And we know that cost can often be a barrier. So Sweet Sobriety is our baby, in that we wanted to create a culture of safety where you can come, show up as you are. We take you as you are. We meet you where you are, and hopefully support you into designing and living the life you no longer want to escape from, and that you recover in reality. Clarissa's right. I did just wrap up emotional eating. It's now available for home study. We have more amazing workshops coming. We want to give you a new one every month. The monthly coaching is $25 US. And a lot of people will tell you it's worth their time, it's worth the money, and they really enjoy the groups. If you have more questions about Sweet Sobriety, I am going to, in a moment, share a bit about the platform, but the truth is that Clarissa and I couldn't do it alone. We have some amazing teammates that we would like to bring along with us on this journey. And so far, so good. They've been willing participants. So I'd like to introduce Jennifer Bradley. So Jennifer, will you kind of tell everybody a bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Molly. Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer. Super excited to be here and be a part of Sweet Sobriety. There's so many exciting things going on. the workshops, I think, are an invaluable source of information, and the group. So I'm happy to be a part of it. Yeah, I work with clients one-on-one. I have a degree in mental health and social work, and I've been trained by Bitten Johnson in holistic medicine addiction. I have certifications in adolescent addiction and different training modules, and just excited to be here. I do have a history with food addiction and have been battling it for a really long time. And so I'm excited. It's a good thing to be able to provide that kind of help to anybody else that needs it. My life has been transformed by that, and I want to be able to help other people. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Bethany. Thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer. So hi, I'm Bethany. If you've ever looked at my last name and wondered how do I pronounce that, it's Mazaru. It rhymes with kangaroo. That's probably not how you would say it if you were actually Dutch, so apologies. But anyway, so I live in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. And I have a master's in social work. I'm registered with the Ontario College of Social Workers. And like many people who work in this field, I have my own personal story of sugar and food addiction too. If you want to hear more of that story, it's on the Sweet Sobriety YouTube channel. Yeah, just briefly, it's just a long time, right? So I can remember sneaking food even as a young child, eating more than my share, scheming how to get more from an early age. And then I've battled my weight and my shape for more than 40 years. And I thought it was just the one thing that I couldn't figure out. But yeah, so many areas of my life were great. I'm like, this was a huge hang up for me. So learning about sugar and food addiction was really key for me. But I've also learned that that's one part of the story, right? It's like the tip of the iceberg. And as long as I was focused only on my food and my weight, I wasn't dealing with everything underneath that, like emotions, relationships, codependency, workaholism, perfectionism, all those wonderful things, right? So I'm happy to be part of this team. If you did work with me, we will also talk about more than just the food. And one of the many reasons that I decided to partner with Sweet Sobriety is because like Molly and Clarissa, and now also Jennifer, they're very authentic, right? And I think that we truly want what's best for you. There's no dogma, there's no one right way to recover. And that honesty, like with clients and then with ourselves as well, that's a part of my own core values and something that Sweet Sobriety really encourages and embodies. So you'll never experience like a bait and switch or a fluffy promotion. It's really like we walk the talk and we keep on learning so that we can help people get that freedom from sugar and food addiction. So okay, so as for the brand new workshop that opened today, it's called You Are Not What You Weigh. And this was a real labor of love for me to put together. I have struggled with my weight and body shape for over 40 years, much of my whole life. And I learned early on, mostly from my parents, but from some other people as well, that my weight was a problem that had to be solved. And I internalized the belief that my life would be better, it would be easier if I was thin. And then in the past few years, along with this whole journey of recovery, I've learned a lot about weight and health and identity. And that has helped me gain another level, another measure of freedom that I haven't felt before. So naturally, I wanted to help as many people as I could with that who might be in a similar boat. So over the month of April, we're going to dive into this and learn, first of all, what the research says about weight, about BMI, about physical health, mental health, what influences our weight. And hint, hint, it's a lot more than just diet and exercise that influences our weight. Things like weight stigma, weight bias, weight inclusiveness, what happens to our bodies and our brains when we try to lose weight. What is this health at any size movement and what it is not. What we might want to consider measuring if we're not going to measure weight. And then what we can do to change our own, perhaps complicated relationship with the scale. So the way that these workshops work and the way this is one is going to roll out is that there are 4 pre-recorded videos. Each one's about 20 to 40 minutes, and it comes with a downloadable slide deck. So you can follow along. And then one is going to be released each week so that you can go at your own pace. And then there's homework for each session too, to help apply what you're learning. There's a list of resources, like things like suggested podcasts, books, resources for further exploration. And then we will also have 4 1-hour live support sessions in April, right? And the replay will be available for those too. So that's a chance for people who are in the course to come and ask questions. I'll be there. Your peers will be there too. You can share what you're learning. You can go a little bit deeper. So, and that's $50 US for that for the month of April. And that course material opened up today, and those live sessions will be Wednesdays in April at 2 p.m. Eastern. So that is April 5th, 12th, 19th, and 26th. So I think Molly has done a great job of putting the links in there. It's also at sweetsobriety.ca if you want to find out more. And please let me know if you have any questions about it at all. I'll be here for the duration of the open house tonight. And now I'm going to pass it back to Molly, who can give us a quick tour of the Sweet Sobriety platform.
Yeah. All right. So for anybody who's, again, brand new, have never interacted with us whatsoever, like Bethany said, the website is www.sweetsobriety.ca. You do have to do the www. My husband is still working on why it's not forwarding without putting in the www. So for right now, make sure you're putting that in. And when you get there, the website looks mostly like this. This is me signed in. So you would have to sign in. Actually, let me log out real quick. I should have done that. So when you just come to the website, unless you're logged in, this is what everybody sees. And you can click on each one of these and go learn more about eating disorders, sugar and food addiction, whatever label we want to put on it. And to understand that we really like to work at the intersection of these things, which is why it's on our front page. So you'll want to sign up and sign in. And once you do that, hopefully it's not going to make me, oh, dang it. Go through the CAPTCHA. Enough to say that that's the crosswalk. You never know what they want. Okay. So once you log in, it looks very similar, but a little different. I always get rid of the little pop-up, but all of the things across the top are still pretty much the same. So you can click on all courses and it will take you to, again, the emotional eating home study, the new workshop, You Are Not What You Weigh. This one's still up there. I'm going to have to take that off today because we just ended that. But you can see that we've got a cravings workshop that you can do at home as a home study. We've got Surviving the Holidays, which Bethany did. And we have our Sweet Sobriety Foundations that Clarissa talked a bit about. And that is, those foundation modules are based on the research, the treatment audit that we did. Clarissa and I were a part of and continue to be a part of with Dr. Jen Unwin out of the UK and a team out of Sweden. But if I go back to this is going to show me the courses that I'm logged into. So I'm in the monthly group coaching. This is where you find your recordings. So if you're in monthly group coaching and you don't have this, let me know. It's a secret link to get that. And then if I continue to scroll, it's going to show you a calendar. And so like today or for tomorrow, it shows what's coming up for tomorrow. I'm registered for some group coaching, both at 2 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Eastern. If you continue scrolling, it shows you all the courses available. And if you keep going, this is where our community is. So on the left-hand side, you're going to see the different communities that I'm a part of. And it doesn't show all of them just because I haven't registered myself as a student, and all of them, mostly this is for, just like for purposes to be able to show you guys. I typically am logged in as an admin. But if I say, okay, oops, my scroll isn't working so well. So if I go into my group coaching, it's going to show group coaching here. Clarissa posted the link for group last night there. So I'd be able to click this and join group from that link. It also comes to your email 10 to 15 minutes before group starts. Unfortunately, that's how the system is set up. The platform that we use is called Zenler, and it's integrated with Zoom. So we don't have to pay for Zoom for our group members, but the disadvantage is that we don't have the link for groups until about 15 minutes before group starts. But you see that people are posting like resources and support of one another. we had a topic in group one day about social rejection. And so somebody like had doodled some things and wanted to share it. And so, it's just a nice little place to have a community chat that's separate from Facebook, which, will shadow ban us and take things down for community violations, because we talk about things like addiction and eating disorders and that kind of thing. You'll also find an About Us page where it talks about Clarissa and I's story, how we even came together to decide this is what we're going to do. You get to meet Bethany and Jennifer, a little bit more about us. This is where you can sign up for one-on-one coaching services. We each have a Book Now link. You learn a little bit more about our styles. And you can follow the links to book some free consultation calls with us. We have a frequently asked questions section that tells you more about our services and if you sign up, how do you quit, all of that. We have a resources page that I'm always trying to keep updated. So we've got some free non-12-step meetings that are facilitated by Bethany, Jennifer, myself, and some peers, Marla and Susie. We've got some non-12-step or some 12-step meetings that people have, really felt strongly have been helpful for them. Some different podcasts, YouTube, self-help books, social media that we think are important for people to find support in, mainly Vera's Sugar-Free for Life group. We have a page, but mostly our support comes here on this platform, as well as Molly Carmel and Jonathan Cranford. We feel like they have some good supportive communities as well. I posted this link in the chat for Sweet Sobriety Stories. I think we're up to 21 or 20 plus videos now of people sharing their stories, including Bethany. Like Bethany said, hers is on there if you want to go hear her story and learn some more. Sign up for our newsletter or email list if you haven't, because that's where we send, that's where you're going to get the most information. The media tab is going to show you podcasts that we have been guests on that you can take a look at. And then it takes you right back to courses and community. You can just click community if you want, and it just pulls it up as a full page for your community versus all the way at the bottom of the other page. So I think that's about enough from me for now on the platform, but just to give you guys an idea of all the things that we're currently offering, that there's room to grow. We will continue to offer more. And as those things are available, we'll certainly let you guys know. But I'm going to pass the torch back to Clarissa so she can introduce our guest, who we're all really here to hear from. So I'm very excited. So take it away, Clarissa.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Molly. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce Vanessa Kredler, who's our speaker today. I first met her back in 2017 when we were both students in Esther, I'm not going to try and say her name, Helga.
Goodsmanstadter, something like that.
Yep. You got it. You got it. International Food Addiction Counselor Training Program. And there was only a few of us in that class. And I think really out of that class, only Vanessa and I are practicing. And Vanessa has gone on to do incredible, amazing things in Australia. She's a counselor and psychotherapist registered with the Australian Counseling Australian Counseling Association. She has lived experience and takes a compassionate, curious approach to working with clients with a focus on addiction, complex trauma, and the intergenerational nature of trauma. Vanessa's special area is food addiction, because that was the first addiction that forced her into recovery. And her approach is trauma-informed, person-centered, and informed by internal family systems, which we're going to get to hear a little bit more about today. She has an MA in counseling and has undertaken a range of training specific to internal family systems. Vanessa's work is influenced by her own recovery journey and by the principle of do your own work, which means Vanessa is constantly engaged in her own weekly IFS therapy and draws on somatic and other healing modalities. So welcome, Vanessa.
Wow, thank you so much. That was a lovely introduction, and I was listening very intently at what you were sharing. I'm so delighted that you've got this community in Canada and North America. It's something that we don't quite have yet in Australia, and I'm really keen to provide more of that kind of support here so that we can have local kind of peer support as well. So yes, I'm delighted that there are so many lovely people on the call, and I am also looking forward to talking to you a little bit about I suppose the collective aspects of recovery, sort of groups and community, having a voice, and sort of that social justice piece. And I'll tell you a little bit about why I wanted to chat about this area of recovery, just to give you a bit of context. I'm quite passionate about sharing my own lived experience, right? And I know that all of you that have introduced yourselves, who are working with Sweet Sobriety, have your own story, and so do I. And it's so common that we do in this field. And I'm actually, in addition to working with clients as a therapist, I also am an ambassador for a nonprofit organization here in Australia called Sane Australia, and they essentially support people with complex mental illness. So various conditions fit under that, but one of them is eating disorders, addictions, trauma. So I kind of fit into that area. And I also share my experience with another nonprofit from time to time called the Blue Knot Foundation, which is which helps people with complex trauma in particular. And interestingly, they say that 1 in 4 people has complex trauma. Those are stats from Australia, but it just shows how common that is. And I find often that is related to addiction. There is a connection there, not for everyone, but for some of us. So I also really enjoy sharing my lived experience because I often have clients who come to me because they see on my website, I've got a little section on my story, and they say, the reason I got in touch was because I resonate with that story somehow. And it's not like a list of symptoms or something, it's just a story. And that kind of really moves me because it shows that, at the end of the day, the way we connect is through personal kind of experience, lived experience, and personal stories. And I just am humbled that people connect in that way. It makes me feel connected as well. It makes me feel like things that I do are of value, right? So that's, one of the reasons why I wanted to speak on this topic, is that sort of community aspect of recovery. But another reason is that I was super inspired by this podcast episode, the Food Junkies podcast with Emily August. And it's a recent one. It's, I think, I can't remember. I think it might be 113, the episode or something. I'm not sure. But if you haven't listened to it, I'd highly recommend it. And what she talks about is bringing the social tool, bringing the tool of social justice to abstinence and to body neutrality, and breaking away from the mainstream conceptions of how people should eat and what their bodies should look like. And that podcast really energized me, because it's that sort of aspect of recovery is kind of like, we don't always talk about that. And the reason also why it really energized me is because I myself follow an abstinent food plan, and I consider abstinence a cornerstone of my recovery. It's almost like, my first step, my first kind of station on the ongoing train of recovery. But the thing is, my experience with abstinence is that it was a real journey for me to actually accept that as a solution for myself. I knew that I needed to be abstinent. That became very clear to me over time, but it took me about 5 years in a 12-step program in Overeaters Anonymous to try and moderate and to sort of, work out what's what, and it just, nothing really worked. And so in the end, my personal story is that I flourished in another 12-step program where it was quite rigid, like it's like weighed and measured and da 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 da. And so that isn't for everyone. You know, abstinence means a lot of things for a lot of people. But my point is, the reason why I was so inspired by what Emily said is that we should all be able to find our own truth of what recovery is for us, right? There are some sort of non-negotiables that each person needs to work out for themselves with support. And then we live by that, you know, we sort of live by that without shame. We shine in the world without shame, and we don't have to be ashamed of the way that we eat or the way that we found is right for us. But, you know, for me, and again, this is my lived experience, right? It doesn't apply to everyone, but for me, there was a huge amount of shame when I first came into recovery. Because I was ashamed that I had to go to one of those groups, and then that I had to eat so strangely, like, you know, like, why can't I just eat like other people? And so when I first came into the 12-step groups, I was keeping it a secret from everyone. Like, nobody knew I was going there. I was really embarrassed. And, you know, it's called something anonymous. So it's that sort of secrecy there as well, in terms of like, oh, you know, and it was in a church basement. So it was like down there somewhere in the corner in the back room. And so I just felt so ashamed. And then gradually I did get into recovery in those 12-step groups, and I actually began to love those meetings, and I began to love the people, and I just really connected with people. But the solution that was presented, which is abstinence, was really, it's so stigmatized in the world. Nobody understands it. Nobody knows what it is. And I have a lot of clients today that are struggling with this. They say things like, you know, yes, okay, I can see I need to be abstinent. I've worked that out, but it's unpractical, you know, for my family. My social circle won't accept it. I have to conform to how they eat, right? So in the end, people go back to eating or trying to eat like other people, like normal people, as we sometimes say in the recovery world. Because they just feel like so left out if they don't eat, you know, in ways like other people do. And so for me, you know, that happened as well. I was a real kind of people pleaser, like I think Bethany shared. You know, I had my story with codependency recovery as well, and multiple other addictions. But in terms of codependency, it was a matter of, you know, I was just trying to people please and really make, really sort of dependent on other people's reactions and emotions and making sure they were okay. And so it felt really unsafe for me for a really long time to make special requests in restaurants, or to, you know, bring my abstinent food, or to ask people to accommodate my abstinent way of eating at social events. And so it took me a long time to build up the courage and the recovery to kind of, you know, eat like I need to eat, you know, in an abstinent way. And so that's why I was so taken by what Emily said when she talks about destigmatizing the tool of abstinence. And I've kind of made that part of my mission, really, is to do that, right? And I kind of often compare it when I speak to clients or when I speak publicly. You know, it's just a tool. It's like being in a wheelchair or wearing glasses. It's kind of like, you know, if I'm in a wheelchair, I can't kind of do a trek across the mountain. Like, I have to be on a sort of particular path that's accessible to me. And likewise, if I need glasses to, you know, to see or to read, then, you know, that's just what I need. And so for me, that is my abstinent food plan. And it's a certain food plan, and I call it a medical food plan. So when people ask, I just say, I'm on a medical food plan. And I think we should be able to do that, to eat the way that's right for us, whatever that is. It's not like that. It's not abstinence for everyone. Sometimes it's moderation. People need to work that out, right? But we should be able to do that without discrimination. And it really makes me kind of think about those types of movements of minority groups, like disability groups or neurodivergent groups or LGBTIQ+, those types of movements. And I feel like, you know, they're really working on celebrating their diversity and uniqueness. And it made me think, oh, you know, I kind of want to do the same with people who struggle with food addiction, because I kind of want to be seen, and I want all of my peers and my clients to be seen and to be able to, you know, practice their recovery, you know, freely and without shame. Now, I also want to recognize that, you know, I talk a lot about abstinence, and, you know, often it's misunderstood as dietary restraint, right? Because, you know, for some people it is, like, some people sort of try to use that tool as dietary restraint, and that's not the intention. But for so many of us, it's a tool of liberation. Like, it really, and I think Emily used those words too. If I'm not, for me, I always say, you know, freedom. There is that saying about freedom comes through discipline, or something like that, discipline through freedom. And for me, it's like that. It's just so simple to follow my food plan. It's effortless nowadays, because I get the freedom from all the obsession around the food, from all the distress. And so I suppose I really want to speak for, you know, we need a movement like this in the food addiction world. And I'm really, really delighted to hear about, you know, to listen to all the Food Junkies podcasts, for example, right? That's sort of like a start of a movement where people have different voices. And also the Sugar Free for Life Facebook group, which comes kind of with the podcast, and, you know, that sort of connection there. And it's a wonderful, wonderful global community. It's got, like, I think 15,000 members. You know, I think it's a wonderful way of seeking support and giving support, and also it gives us a voice as a community. And that brings me to, you know, my next point about community and joining recovery groups, and just to share, you know, a little bit of my experience with that as well. Because, like I said, you know, in the beginning, when I first came into recovery, or, you know, in the very beginning, even before I came into recovery, I was so isolated. Like, I tried all these diets for years and years, and I had all this dialogue in my head. I had so many parts of me in my head working against each other, and you know, telling me what to eat and what not to eat. And it was just so exhausting. And then I got so desperate that I sought help. And then from a therapist, I was referred to a 12-step program. And I gradually found a tribe, a community that I stayed with. And I, you know, went and tried lots of different programs and whatever peer support I could find. You know, none of them were perfect, but it was just a way of connecting to people. And it's so important to have a community of some sort, because, as I think Molly said in the beginning, you know, cost is a barrier, right? And we need a lot of support. And I needed daily support for many years, like years, you know, and I couldn't have been able to afford that through you know, having a counselor. Or it just doesn't happen like that. And so that was a really important reason for why I went to those groups. But also, you know, I got so much else out of those groups. Like, I identified with my peers. I heard people's stories, and it was like, oh my God, that's me. Like, I get that. And I just, you know, it's something that is such a liberating thing when, you know, we find people who relate, who really relate. So that connection and that sharing the load together, and having that daily support, having the daily accountability, and overcoming social stigma. You know, it really reduced my shame that I felt around my food addiction. And so it's like, I mean, a community, like a peer community, is like, it's a safety net, but it's also like an energy net, kind of. It's an energy source, you know. It's a real kind of important thing for me. And I know that nowadays there's a lot more peer community support. It doesn't necessarily have to be 12-step groups, but I most certainly owe my whole life really and my recovery to peer support. And without peer support, I wouldn't have the recovery that I've got today, which is, I've been in recovery for 15 years. I've been abstinent for 9 years, and I find myself thriving in the world, right? Like I've got all the tools, I've got my community, and, I've got what I need. And there's no way that I could have created a lifestyle around my abstinence, around my recovery, without having learned that in the groups through daily support and through really intensive immersion in those groups. And I think it's so important that everybody is able to find their own truth and then to live that within a community, to be able to live that and to really, manage their addiction in that way, because addiction is chronic as well. So it's something that we're not necessarily cured from, even though a lot of people come and they want that. But we need daily support, and recovery is an ongoing, it's a journey. It's an ongoing journey. And like I said, abstinence is the beginning for me of that journey. So I suppose, I've got like a strong kind of desire to sort of, deliver that message that, we should be able to shine without shame. We should be able to work out our journey and then just, follow our own way, really immerse ourselves deeply into this journey and live by whatever we decide, whatever we discover is our truth in recovery. And also, we should be able to do that in society without discrimination, and whatever doesn't belong to us in terms of judgment, we should be able to give that back to where it belongs to. And that's where, for me, internal family systems is great too, because it's a form of therapy that I am very passionate about. It's kind of like a lifestyle, more so than just a therapy. And the reason why internal family system is such a passion for me is because you can work at the individual level, but you can also work at the collective level. And it's a really wonderful modality for groups as well as for individuals. And so I'd like to maybe tell you a tiny bit about IFS, if that's okay, internal family systems. And why I love it so much. So essentially, internally family system says that we all have a system of parts of us, right? Of parts that drive our actions at certain times, and they have us think a certain way or feel a certain way or be a certain way and do certain things. It's almost like we've got sort of sub-personalities, and that's considered very healthy. It's not, pathological as such. It's just the mind is a multiple entity, is what IFS says. And we carry a lot of burdens. We have parts of us that carry burdens, and IFS can deal with the burdens that we carry individually through our life experience. And IFS can also work with what we share, the burdens, the cultural burdens that we share, the societal burdens, such as, for example, discrimination or whatever it may be. And that's why I love IFS so much. And to tell you a little bit more about parts, parts kind of show up in our system as thoughts or feelings or images or sensations or inner voices, just like sub-personalities. But then what's wonderful about IFS is that it also speaks of we have a self as well as parts, right? So we have a self that is kind of like an innate kind of quality or center. And it doesn't have an agenda. It's kind of like a wise, higher self. And self has the qualities of the 8 C's. And I'll tell you what they are. They are compassion, curiosity, connectedness, confidence, clarity, courage, creativity, calm. So, you know, when we're in that sort of self energy, as we call it, when we're in that centered space, we can take actions that are in our best interest and in our truth. So, you know, like, for example, being abstinent, because we know that that's in our truth. And there's no kind of internal chatter around, you know, this is, you know, this is wrong or this is right, right? So there's none of that. And so that's where self energy comes in. And so when I'm in that sort of state, yeah, I can really look after myself. But quite often I'm driven by parts of me, right? And they've got an agenda, and there are many different parts going at the same time. And that's why sometimes we talk about we self-sabotage, right? It's like, it seems like one part wants this, but then another part wants that. And then I don't know what I'm doing, and I end up doing, you know, something that wasn't quite right for what my truth is. And so that's where IFS is really great, in sort of like dialoguing with our parts to really get them on board and learn about and understand what they're concerned about, and, you know, what their fears are, and how we can align our system. So with IFS work, the goal is to kind of help our parts relax a bit, because a lot of our parts, when we've had experiences in the past that were scary or traumatic or in some way just difficult and challenging, we develop these parts that are like quite extreme, you know, in terms of the behaviors that they might have, the way they have us think or feel. And so we want to be sure that we work with them to kind of help them relax and, you know, work to their strengths in the system, as opposed to have these really extreme roles, like, for example, binging and purging. That for us in the food world would be really, you know, common parts. So our goal really is to help them relax, to feel safe enough, and to maybe then pivot their roles so that they can be a little bit more helpful. And if we have time, we could do a little, you know, maybe 5 to 10 minutes sort of internal journey, and just get a bit of a taste of it if you'd like. Do we?
Yeah, that would be awesome. We absolutely do.
Okay, let's try that. Because with IFS, and I think, yeah, we spoke to that earlier, right? It's like, it's all about the somatic and the sort of experiencing a little bit as well, rather than just getting the information. And I certainly have found that very helpful in my own inner work, is that I can get a lot of information, but I kind of need to experience it too, right? So if it feels right for you, let's see if we can have a little tiny taste, a little experience, focusing on one of the 8 C's, one of the qualities of the self, which is courage. And the reason why I thought that might be a nice exercise is because, you know, I've just talked about recovery and having a voice and living your truth and being in community, and it's sort of that social activism piece almost, right? Having courage. And so that's why I wanted to see whether we could, you know, have a little guided experience. And this is something that I learned in one of the IFS courses that I joined last year. So if it feels right, just take a moment to get comfortable. And also, just as if it feels right, close your eyes. If it doesn't feel right, just have them open and a soft gaze. And just take some deep breaths, if that helps. And just slow things down a little bit. So we've done a lot of talking. Well, I've done a lot of talking, lots of words. So let's slow it down. And take a breather. And so this really brief guided practice is just designed to help you embody a quality of self, if your parts allow it. And so that quality is courage. And so just think of a time in your life when you felt a lot of courage. And what I mean by courage is acting towards a worthwhile goal despite the presence of risk, uncertainty, and fear. So it could have been maybe a time when you had courage to speak about something scary, or the courage to act, or when you knew wholeheartedly that this is my truth. And it doesn't have to be related to abstinence. It could be anything, any kind of situation. It's just about, courage to do something that a lot of your parts were afraid to do. So just scan through your past, maybe looking at different points, and see if you can find a moment that feels right, where you felt courageous. And when you find that courageous version of you, see if you can put that person, that version of you, in a room by him or herself. When you're outside the room looking at that person through a window. So just looking at that person, that courageous version of yourself, as if through a window, and see how you feel towards that earlier version of you who held such courage and clarity and strength. Yeah, and see how your parts react to that person. See if they'd be willing to let you embody that quality of courage and to become that version of you, and to enter that space. Even though circumstances might be different now, and it might be that you've got parts going right now who are like, no, I'm not willing, and that's okay too. So if that's the case, if they're worried about embodying the quality of courage, just be with them, because in IFS we say all parts are welcome. So just be with your inner experience and explore their fears. What are they afraid would happen if you embodied that quality of self, that courage, even just for a little while? Just see what they say if that's the case. But if they are willing then to go ahead and enter the room where that courageous version of you is, and step into that person's body and just feel that courage in your body now. So just feel courage in your body, however it shows up. And just noticing what it feels like, again, to be in the courage. And just being with the quality of courage in your body, and noticing where it is in your body. Where does it show up? And maybe exploring if it has like a color or a shape or, you know, some kind of a consistency or energy. And just embodying courage. And again, seeing how your parts react to you being in a courageous state with them. Just noticing what's going on inside. And then, if it feels right, just slowly, as we've had just this tiny, tiny taste, if it feels right, just begin to shift your focus back to the room. And just focus your attention back to the outside world. And see if it's possible to hold a courageous state, a clear and strong courageous state, even as you come back to the room. And so with that, I just want to, offer, the message that when we are together in recovery, when we are, working in community, when we're part of a peer community, it's kind of easier to be courageous, I find. And we can support each other in forums such as this one, this group here right now, such as the Sugar Free for Life Facebook group, and whatever other peer groups, 12-step or non-12-step, whatever is out there, to have a voice, right? To be empowered, to have a voice together that speaks for recovery, and to not be ashamed of our recovery, because, food addiction is still a term that's not really officially recognized. And so until that happens, which I'm sure it will one day, it's sort of a matter of really standing up for ourselves in that way, right? So I just wanted to share with you lastly, before I hand back to Clarissa and Molly, I do have a free Zoom coming up, which is happening in about, God, I'm trying to work out time difference. It's in about 48 hours. It's like, for me, it's Saturday morning, 9 a.m. For you guys, it would be something like 6, it'd probably be 6 p.m. Eastern time on Friday night. So you're welcome to join that, and I'll take you through a collective unburdening around our unbalanced food culture. So it's another way of experiencing internal family systems, a little bit longer and different from what we've just done. And lastly, I'll tell you about my 6 weeks internal family systems small group that is still open for enrollment. It's going to be a small group. It's going to start on the 15th of April, and I'm going to teach you how to work and dialogue with your own system of parts as it relates to food and eating. So that's another opportunity. And with that, yes, thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Are you open to answering any questions from our audience? Does anyone? Awesome. Does anyone have any questions?
I also wanted to say, if you have any feedback or, want to share anything about your experience, that, please go ahead as well, whatever feels right.
Yeah, Bethany?
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Vanessa. So is it your experience, or in your experience with clients, are there sort of standard parts that people tend to have, or does everyone have different parts? I know they can all sort of be varying strengths and things, but are there, you know, sort of a few key parts that everyone tends to have, or is everyone different?
Yeah, that's a great question. Both. It's like, yes, everyone's different, but yes, there are definitely standard sort of parts. So in IFS, the way that we look at addiction is actually like a polarization of two sides, right? Two sort of sets of parts almost. And it's like, if you've got, so addictive parts that commonly show up are like, you know, bingers or purges, you know, and we call them firefighters in IFS because they're like those parts that sort of just come in and they don't care about the consequences of what they're doing. They're just all about the here and now. We've got to relieve the flames of what's going on, right? And then on the other side, we've got the managers who are a bit more the planners and the future anxious kind of, you know, thinkers, and that are trying to make us function in the world. And so common parts that we see in food addiction are, you know, a binger shows up and it just wants to eat and eat and eat. And as soon as that is done, or even as soon as it's started, a manager comes up from the other side, which is an inner critic, and it goes, oh, you're just, you know, useless. You've done it again. Why can't you? Blah, blah, blah. And then we've got a manager maybe that starts going, well, now we're going to have to, you know, exercise or starve or do this or do that. So, right. And then, and you might have a purger as well, which is sort of quite extreme and will go and purge. And, you know, so many parts. So yes, we absolutely have, we see common parts that you can find in all addictions, but then specifically also to food addiction. Absolutely.
So then the goal more of IFS is for us to be able to talk to the binger or the purger and to see why they think they're helping us when actually we know now and maybe at one point they were solving a problem, but now they are creating the problem. Is that kind of the gist?
Yeah, that's right. It's, you know, often when we are, you know, in recovery communities, or even when we do treatment in therapy, it's about combating the condition, right? It's like I'm battling an eating disorder, I'm fighting a disease. And so IFS is a little bit different. It's about being really compassionate with our parts, right? All parts are welcome. And every part has a good intention, every part, even the most extreme parts of us. And so, yes, it's absolutely about befriending these parts and really learning what they're afraid of would happen if they didn't do those extreme jobs. And over time, we are able to help them soften or pivot their role. And another aspect of IFS work, which goes a lot deeper than just dialoguing with our parts, is that often those extreme parts, they're protecting younger and vulnerable parts of us. And really, ultimately, we can establish trust in the system so that we can also go to those earlier parts and help them, right, and heal what is underlying. But really, you know, early on, the work that we do in IFS, it's more about learning about the parts that show up, such as the bingers, the purges, you know, the ones that are having protective big jobs and strategies to help us, even though they're not really helping us.
Does anyone else have any questions for Vanessa? Sandra, please go ahead.
Hi, I don't have my video. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I've been having trouble with audio and video together today, but I'm just and now I missed the first part because I was having trouble getting into the open house. But Vanessa, is this along the lines of radical self-compassion as well? Or do they use IFS with radical self-compassion? Like it's like IFS is its own entity?
Yeah, that's a lovely question. IFS is certainly its own entity, but compassion is the key. It's like if there's one word, it's probably if there's two words that will describe IFS, it's probably compassion and curiosity. So yes, it's very compatible with radical acceptance, and just being very curious and open to whatever is presented. So, when I just took you through that guided practice, it's about being present with our experience, right? And being compassionate to whatever is going on inside without any judgment. And we know that parts come in and they will start judging, and even that's okay, right? Because that's what parts do. But yes, it's about practicing compassion, being compassionate with whatever is going on inside.
Does that answer your question, Sandra?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra. And I have a question from Elaine.
Hi there. I'm out walking. It's a little cold here. I have a question about parts. Can we also think of them as like parts of our brain, and instead of like this, like different people inside us, as just parts of our brain that are doing all those things that you were saying about parts? So that's my question.
I love that question, Elaine, because it highlights a really important area, which I'm sort of conceptualizing in my own mind, right? Which is that when we have addiction, like at least when we have an early onset addiction, it's like our brain is wired, right? And it's just a brain kind of function, right? So the way I see it is that the brain just does certain things, and parts kind of develop around it, if that makes sense. But it's certainly helpful in our practice in going inside and doing our inner work to conceptualize our parts in that way. So yes, you could say, for example, when you're doing your own inner work, it's that brain part of me that's doing this, that's doing the binging or whatever. I think it's very helpful. Absolutely, you can. Yeah. Does that make sense?
That made sense to me, unless Elaine was referring to like specific parts of the brain that each part may
Yeah,
play.
no, that makes sense. So like when you're talking about parts, say you were talking about like the part that might binge, and the other person, the manager part, are those like what areas of the brain is that?
Yeah.
And then as the manager gets stronger, is that because we've rewired the brain?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's like you could certainly in your own mind, you can sort of say, oh, it's that scared part of the brain, the amygdala or whatever, right? And sort of and converse with it in that way, because isn't that a wonderful way of showing compassion and like really working with, like really accepting, being with your own internal system, if that makes sense, right? That's just how the system works, the brain works, the body works, the nervous system. So yes, you can absolutely do that.
Yeah, and I like that, the manager could be the prefrontal cortex, right? Who's trying to be like your executive function. I do have another question here about what other therapies work well in conjunction with what you do.
Yeah. What I do is like, it's a mix of doing IFS for the deeper work, the deeper sort of internal inquiry, but then also, the addictions, what's the word, methodologies or modalities that we use are very helpful as well for people in a very practical sense. So things like solution focused or motivational interviewing, for example. I do a little bit of work on emotion focused. You know, that sort of work is important in my mind in addiction recovery, because we need practical strategies, right? It's not just going in and doing all the deep work. That's an important part of it, but especially right in the beginning of recovery, people, you tell me, right, what your experiences are, but for me, it was like, I need help. I need someone to tell me what to eat or what to, you know, like what to do. I need somebody to help me work it out. I need somebody to hold my hand and guide me all the way through and work out some real practical solutions, because I'm in a mess, right? And so there is space for both of those areas, right? The deeper work with IFS, the sort of compassionate looking at what's going on and really being with your own experience, but also the really practical stuff.
And then when I know you do extensive work related to trauma and complex trauma, do you use IFS as the modality to treat that?
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit more about how that what the parts might look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that goes a level further almost. So with IFS, what we do, and I'll teach a little bit about that when I do my 6-week IFS group. What we do first is we do something which is the 6X, which is essentially where we first focus on a part and then we flesh it out, so to speak, right? We sort of really get to know it. We look at how we feel towards it. We look at how do we befriend it. So it's a matter of getting to know the parts that we call protectors. So they're either firefighters or managers. They're the parts that have those extreme strategies. And as we get to know them, they're almost kind of like gatekeepers. They're like, you know, like I'm doing all these protective things and like I'm not letting anyone in. But then when we get to know them, we see that what they're protecting or what they've exiled, as we call it, right, is something really tender and vulnerable because of something that might have happened in the past. So when it's trauma, of course, something has happened in the past, you know, it could be lots of little things, or it could be a big thing, you know, little t, big T trauma. And so when we get to that, it's kind of like we get to what we call an exile in IFS, and that might be a young part that was vulnerable, that had a bad experience or a challenging experience. And what we do then is, so we really develop a relationship. The self develops a relationship with that young part, and we are basically with that part. We're witnessing what that part wants to show us. We're witnessing what it wants to tell us about the past, or whatever, you know, whatever comes up for it in images or in words or in, you know, memories or feelings or whatever it is. And then the process is, it's called, in IFS, it's called unburdening. So there is an unburdening sort of protocol, if you like. And the steps are essentially that we're witnessing what the part is telling us, that exiled young part, as long as it needs. It could go for sessions and sessions, or it could go for just a few minutes. It's very different for whatever exile we're working with. And then we offer a do-over, which is, what did that part actually really need back then that it didn't get? And we offer to give that to the part. So the self might come into the scene, right? Because we're all working very internally in our inner sort of world. So we offered for the self of the client to go into the scene and give the part whatever it needed. And it's the part, the exiled part, that will say, this is what I needed. It's not us telling it, you know, giving it some kind of a healing thing. It's more like, what did it, you know, we're really dialoguing with it. And it's a slow and deep process. And then we basically, eventually, when that feels complete, we can ask that part if it then wants to come back with us into the present. And it's sort of like an unburdening process of, you know, what qualities might want you do, what you want to leave behind in the past, what new qualities do you want to take on? For example, courage or confidence or those types of qualities. And then we bring them back into the present, and they might even want to have a new name, you know, whatever it is. So that's kind of the process when you do the deeper work, and that's usually longer term psychotherapy work.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. So if I'm somebody that is here today and I'm really curious about taking your 6-week course, what are probably some of the benefits I'm going to get? And then like when I leave this 6 weeks, what's going to be changed for me? Like, and I know you can't guarantee anything, but what have you experienced in the past that individuals have gained from this?
Yeah, that's a lovely question. Yeah, what will be the change? That's right. It's like you learn, you know, it's learning about what internal family systems is, just at a sort of, you know, overview level, and to learn about, you know, how do we see addiction in IFS? How do we work with it? What are some of the common parts that I might encounter? And I'll show you a way of mapping your parts so that you can sort of find a way of going, oh, that might be a manager, and you kind of, you know, you kind of put them on a map, and so you've got a bit of an idea of your kind of system that of parts as they show up, so you can be more aware of them in your day-to-day life. And I'll teach you how to essentially dialogue with them, so it becomes a little bit easier to say, for example, I go over to the fridge, I find myself wanting to, you know, go and do the binge. I can sort of go, hey, like, you know, I can start that dialogue because I've got a bit of a framework for dialoguing with those parts. And so I suppose the change that you would get from having a little tiny immersion into the world of IFS is that you've got a tool to dialogue with your parts, to be more aware, to become more aware of, you know, which part am I operating from right now? What are some of the polarizations that are going on in my head when there is one part going and the other part going, you know? And so, yeah, it's creating awareness and giving you a tool for dialogue with your parts.
And it sounds like a lot more insight into the behaviors of what's going on, right? So that's awesome, Vanessa. Thank you so much for answering. I know they might have been tricky questions. Does anyone else have any question before we wrap up?
Because I came in late, of course, because, you know, tax season, but so I missed Vanessa's talk on it. But I do practice some IFS with my therapist, but it's in a different sense of she doesn't use, and I actually prefer not to, like manager and fireman. And so I don't get overly specific. It's my young child, it's kind of like my teenager, or my, you know, my hurt self, like I've come to realize that the parts of me, like I talk to, you know, and that's something I've learned from Molly and Clarissa is what is, you know, to stop and say, okay, what does little Marla want? I don't have to go to a specific, but I find that because I really wanted to do like the manager and the fireman and the, you know, because that's the way it was created, but it just didn't seem to fit with me, where I'd rather go like, okay, so my protectors, right? My protectors were my behaviors, my bitterness, my anger, my resentment, my fear, like those are kind of my parts. And I'm just wondering if it can have the same impact, or is it like a totally different way of looking at things? Because like I know, I don't know how this happened, but like those parts, the anger and the resentment are kind of, I don't want to say gone, but they've been shifted. So now I see the sadness. So what part of me is sad is what I'm working on now, right? It's my, I mean, I know I was probably sad as an infant, but you know, at different stages, I don't get really, really specific unless it's a specific, but I just want to know if it has the same kind of value. Because I think IFS is fascinating, and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It would have the same value because, you know, it's easy for a therapist to sort of bombard, you know, or, you know, to give you all the names and all the expressions. You absolutely don't need them. It's absolutely fine to say this is a part. And so what you've just described, it's like, it sounds like, you know, you're getting to a point where you've had, you know, you've got protectors that were fearful, and then the sadness is what's underneath, right? So I could say, well, that's an exile, but do you need to know? Does anybody need to know? No, we don't need to talk about that. Right. It's about the inner experience, isn't it?
And that's the overwhelm for me, right? Like, oh my God, it's an exile, it's a manager. It's a bottom line for me is it's kind of like not gone. I don't know that it'll ever be gone, but I've uncovered it or brought up so much of it that now I can see the underlying of all that, which is profound sadness in so many areas, but it's not as painful as the anger and the resentment. I don't know. Anyways, that's, yeah.
Wonderful. It sounds like you're getting some great results then. That's really great. And no, and that's exactly how it works. And it's wonderful that it's giving you those, that, you know, that sort of insight into the deeper layers, because it's also easy in recovery. You know, we got to start somewhere, and eventually we get a bit deeper, right? And so it sounds like that's what's happening for you, which is wonderful.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Vanessa. And if anyone want to reach out to you or ask any more questions, is there a specific like link or something that we should put in the chat, or we're going to email it out, so you can just send us any of the best ways to contact you, and we'll send it to anyone who signed up today and anyone who is on our newsletter, and we'll share it in the Facebook group as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. I'll send you the links. It will just be through my website, which is vanessakredler.com. So very easy. You can sign up to my newsletter there, and also find out about the Zoom call in a couple of days, and the group as well. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
And this is recorded, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
You know,
The
it's
re-
tax time here, and
Yeah.
you know, we don't get home till crazy hours and then have to cook.
The replay will go out tomorrow. Yep. Thanks, everybody. Make sure to send us any questions that you might have, and we can forward them to Vanessa, or we can connect you to Vanessa. And if you have any questions for us for Sweet Sobriety, please let us know. I'm thinking, what's today? Wednesday. If you're a member of Sweet Sobriety, or if you want to be, we do have 2 group coaching options tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Eastern as well. So 2 times the opportunity to come and get the support that you need. All right. Take care, guys. Have a great night.
Have a good night. Bye.
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 If you like what you heard today, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.